Basically, they've gotten the FCC's heads spinning around with the fact that they're going to create, 3 million jobs, have a $500 billion impact to the GDP, and spur $275 billion in investment. They're going to create all this new technology. You're going to have doctors operating on people over great distances with robots. You're going to have self-driving cars that can, anticipate accidents and not crash as much. You're going to have people at NASCAR being able to take their phone and popping it into a little headset and sitting in the driver's seat or the passenger seat of their favorite NASCAR driver. They're creating all this stuff, all these things that all of a sudden 5G is the only thing that can answer these problems, which is not true.
Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Just Informed Talk. So today we're going to do something a little bit different. So it has come to my attention that a lot of you guys out there want to know more about 5G. And I'm one of those people who is always looking to learn more about any kind of subject. So when I saw a few stories pop up recently out of Politico, which talked about how there was a divide in the Trump administration with regard to nationalizing 5G, I thought it'd be a great opportunity to have an actual expert on 5G on the show. So this is an interview I did with my friend Alex Phillips, and we talk about all the different nuances coming with this new 5G network, and we talk about the dangers. So you guys are going to want to stick around to watch that, and I hope you enjoy. Hi and welcome. I am here with a good friend of mine, Alex Phillips. He is going to talk to us today about a little thing that we all are worried about, and we all should be worried about if we're not yet, and it is 5G, but it might not be 5G for the same reasons you may be thinking. We're actually going to be talking about the different complexities going into what the implementation of a nationalized 5G would look like, 5G network would look like. And so let me just introduce Alex Phillips here. He is the president of the American Priority Foundation, which is also the host he's also the host of the American Priority Conference. He is the past president of the Wireless ISP Association, and he's the owner of a wireless and fiber broadband ISP. So what we're going to talk about today is 5G, and I just want to say thank you for coming on and welcome.
Yeah, hey Craig, thanks for calling. Just talking about this thing. It's the 5G has been something I've been kind of involved with for several years when I was in the board of directors of WISPA, Wireless ISP Association, but moreover, recently just trying to follow what's going on with regulations and how they're affecting the public. This Politico story that came out of last week about the nationalized 5G proposal coming out of the Trump administration really concerned me, mostly because coming out of CPAC, listening to President Trump talk about how he's not going to do anything socialist in our country, the United States will never be a socialist country, and then had to see this proposal, which has smacks of socialism, really concerned me.
Right, and that's why I wanted to have you on, because I think this deserves a more in-depth discussion. So we have 5G that is this new internet technology, and or this new wireless service, internet connection technology. Why don't you explain to our audience kind of what 5G does, where it kind of came from, and because you know the technical details on that.
Well, so 5G itself is sort of like a marketing term. So we've had the 2G, the 3G, and today we're all using 4G. And so obviously 5 comes next. And I think the running joke is if I was AOC, I would say, why don't we go straight to 10G? But 5G is definitely a marketing term. It's being defined by the standards for a wireless networking system that can support speeds up to 20 gigabits per second. However, if you look at the way it's being implemented, various carriers are going to be implementing it in various different ways. There's the plan for it all be interoperable. However, if a carrier implements it one way, it's definitely not going to be compatible with another carrier's implementation. And so, if you look at the various 5G implementations that are being planned nationwide, You look at Verizon in particular, who has been gobbling up all this millimeter wave technology, which is our spectrum, which is a very small microwave. They're going to be using it in more urban areas to create very small cells. That means that when you look out your window, you'll probably be able to see a transmitter on a street light or under the eave of a building, so that your little puck device that you have, or your phone in that case, some cases, will be able to pick up that signal. Millimeter wave is very small, and it's very affected by things like rain and buildings and trees and skin. So it has to be very close to the user. The frequencies that most cellular phone companies are using today have somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 5 mile range. And so you see cell sites, about 2 to 5 miles from every user. And if you get in between one of those, sometimes you drop your call. They're going to be implementing 5G on that spectrum as well. And then other companies like T-Mobile are going to be developing 5G technologies using the old television spectrum that they were able to purchase last year, sub 1 gigahertz. That means very low frequency. And it's going to have anywhere from 5 to a 10 mile radius of coverage. How does that affect the average public? So if you live in DC or an NFL city, and you get an implementation of the millimeter wave 5G, you're going to have wireless internet services that are going to be ridiculously fast, much faster than you have today. I think today, on a good day, people are somewhere around 20 megabits. They're going to see a rise somewhere in the neighborhood of one gigabit. But you're going to have to be very close to the tower or the transmitter. People that live in the rural areas, urbanized areas, that are going to be leveraging the existing spectrum. So your Verizon has something in the 800 megahertz. They also have 700 megahertz, which is sub 1 gigahertz. Has pretty good range. But your companies like Sprint that are going to be in the 1.9 gigahertz range, you're still going to be looking at about 2 mile range. You're going to see about a 20% increase in speed. However, your coverage, and this is a technical thing, as you get faster, you have to have better connectivity. And so people that are on the fringe of those cell coverage areas are probably going to lose and fall back to 4G. So the higher frequencies, the millimeter wave, shorter distance, significantly shorter distance, but have the tremendous possibility for speed. The current spectrum of today will be about 15 to 20% faster, but have a little bit less coverage. And then companies that are like T-Mobile that are going to be using the television spectrum to build out will be seeing more coverage areas and pretty decent speeds in 5G, because the lower frequencies have less capability, they have less capacity, but they still will have significantly better capacity than what people see today in the rural areas that are in some cases not even getting enough 4G to do anything.
So you're saying in the more urban areas, you're going to have kind of a double-edged sword where it's going to, there's going to be some positives, but there's definitely going to be some negatives for certain people in certain areas. I guess my question would be after that, when you nationalize the network, because as we're talking about this is the context of what we're talking about it. If you're looking at it, you're saying that it's going to become more, I guess, ubiquitous. Like you're going to go outside on a light pole, you'll see a little 5G, kind of like you have in your house. You have a modem that puts wireless in your house. So in order to increase these speeds and to work on these different, I guess, frequencies, spectrums, they're going to have to put in more of these smaller units, right? So it's going to become something you're going to see more and more. But what is, nationalizing 5G? What does that mean for people out in the rural areas? What does that mean for small rural internet service providers? What does that mean for a person like yourself, when you're going up against this kind of large machine?
Well, a nationalized broadband network like that, a wireless network, is obviously, has all the earmarks of a socialist system. So it'll be a lot of government regulations. So to start with, I would predict seeing very inefficient deployment of this network. And But now let me just say, there's not always bad with these types of ideas. So if you were to have a conversation with some small to medium-sized businesses who've been wanting to get into the networking of or wireless networking business, having access to a network that they don't have to pony up, anywhere from 10 to 40 billion dollars to own the spectrum or lease the spectrum, and then they don't have to spend $1 million plus per tower location, and then the cost of network infrastructure connecting them. It can be a very attractive opportunity for people. I know that today, you look at who's in the marketplace, your Boost Mobile and some of these other, any brand of wireless cellular service that is not Verizon, T-Mobile, Sprint, or AT&T are leveraging a network relationship or roaming relationship, what they call a virtual mobile network provider. And so they're kind of doing the same type of thing where if today I wanted to become, Alex Phillips Cellular Phone Company, I could call up a company that I know and say, hey, I would like to make a commitment of a certain number of phone sales per year. And all of a sudden now I am a cellular phone provider. Although I own no network, I have no control of any of the network, I have to repair none of it. So there's, the good and the bad. But with a nationalized network, then what they're talking about is building it specifically for that'll be owned by the government and contracted to a provider to manage. Obviously, there is no Department of Cellular Services in any branch of government today, and so for them to go out and build a cellular phone network would be ridiculous. So it would be outsourced. The only thing that we have very similar to that today is FirstNet. FirstNet was a national LTE first responder network, and the way it was designed is there was 700 megahertz some spectrum in the 700 megahertz band allocated to FirstNet, and this is all spawned from 9/11. So many things spawned from 9/11 where they didn't have interoperability, and so the concept of every first responder in the nation having a ruggedized LTE cell phone, smartphone in most cases, should give them interoperability, so that if a disaster occurs in New York City and first responders from New Jersey or Pennsylvania or any neighboring territories around that need to come in and help, if they're all part of the same type of network on FirstNet, then they have automatic interoperability. And it gives them some control over prioritization of who has access to the network and all kinds of wonderful things they can do, sharing data and things you do on your cell phone today. But AT&T right now is the contractor primarily in the United States. Not everywhere, because some states have not adopted the FirstNet program. But that's the closest thing to a nationalized 4G network right now. But it was specifically designed for first responders. But it does have a secondary use where if I, for example, wanted to contract with FirstNet to buy off or rent or lease excess capacity on their network, I could sell phones on that network. When there's a disaster, though, all my phones go offline and only first responders will have priority. So, that's just one of the things. But I just, Politico did a follow-up story the next day. They got information from the White House that basically stated that, that the Trump 2020 campaign was floating this idea really based off one of their campaign donors, Peter Thiel.
Okay,
and,
so that's actually a good point for me to jump in on, because that is something I wanted to talk to you. Let me read to you this tweet from President Trump, and I just want to get your reaction on it because, and later we are going to discuss kind of the, in brief, what kind of health effect, dangers, that kind of stuff, because I know a lot of people out there want to talk about that and they want to hear about it. But I just want to read this tweet to you from President Trump. He says, quote, "I want 5G and even 6G technology in the United States as soon as possible. It is far more powerful, faster, and smarter than the current standard. American companies must step up their efforts or get left behind. There is no reason that we should be lagging behind on something that is so obviously the future. I want the United States to win through competition, not by blocking out currently more advanced technologies. We must always be the leader in everything we do, especially when it comes to the very exciting world of technology. Now, I know that goes to your point that you're not really advocating against 5G. You're advocating against nationalizing it and turning it into a socialistic type of program. So, but can you just give a comment on that in general?
Well, so my position, I have multifaceted.
And excuse me, I don't want to interrupt, but then that goes into Peter Thiel and what we were talking about, and that's kind of where I was going with that.
So I have a multifaceted perception and opinion about the 5G. So President Trump is eager to make business in the United States grow, innovation. He would like to see more economic growth. And so the numbers that have been presented to the administration and to the Federal Communications Commission by another wireless association that represents the cellular phone industry is that they're predicting $275 billion in investment from 5G, the creation of 3 million new jobs, and $500 billion impact to the GDP. Well, those are amazing numbers. 3 million new jobs definitely falls in line with President Trump's agenda. Economic growth, obviously, and investing in America, again, all of those fall in line. And so companies like Peter Thiel's company, this is called Rivada Networks, see this as an opportunity to be able to build networks in areas that maybe the big carriers won't do as a subcontractor by standardizing the type of 5G that will be built out nationwide. And I think that they thought that presenting this to the administration in the same way that the administration wants to see bridges built and roads improved, they would become that company that would come in and do something on behalf of the government to ensure that whatever happens for everybody in the country, and it spurs on this economic growth. But I've had my experiences in the past with wholesale type services like that, and the good and the bad. The good is that you're not investing a tremendously large amount of money, and but the bad is that you're a second-class citizen when it comes to your relationship with the network. And so for small businesses, I would highly not recommend supporting a nationalized 5G network because of that one reason, that I don't think it's going to be good for business in the long term. I think it's a good, it sounds good on paper and it sounds good when it's being presented, but I think in the long run, competition in the industry is what really is going to make it and drive it.
Okay, so to that point, first off, for reference, for everyone out there who's watching doesn't know, Peter Thiel is actually one of the initial investors in Facebook, very wealthy.
And PayPal.
And PayPal, correct. And this is a donor to the Trump campaign, so obviously he's been able to bend the ear of people near President Trump, or if not Trump himself. So it is something to take into consideration. But more overly to the point that you were just making, so when you see a company like AT&T going out and picking up all these 700 megahertz spectrum licenses, do you feel that that's just them trying to reestablish a monopoly?
Well, yeah. I mean, AT&T has been, if you go back far enough in time into the 80s, AT&T was Ma Bell. They were the monopoly. They were the monopoly in telecommunications. They were in the days when you had to pay, a tremendously large amount of money for a phone call, plus long distance could literally bankrupt you. And then in the 80s, they got broke up, and we have the various, you have AT&T long distance. You've got AT&T, which is in some cases still a phone company, and then your Bells that broke up into your Verizons, your GTEs, that kind of stuff. And so a lot of this stuff got addressed, but they still want to become the dominant player. And so wireless is obviously a big thing. I mean, everybody's got a cell phone. My first cell phone was a bag phone, and it was tremendously expensive to use, although I thought it was the coolest thing in the world because I could go out on an island in the middle of the James River and make a phone call, That was really cool
It
back in the
was
day.
like the brick cell phone almost.
Well, this was even before the bricks. This was
Oh,
like a
this was like
bag.
this was like one of those, you got
It's
a
like I had a little
suitcase with
man
the.
purse, man purse with my phone pulled out of it, Um, but
So
since
I mean, it's like there's two sides of it. It's like we're looking at this nationalization and saying, that could lead to some really negative effects on smaller businesses and the competition in the industry itself. And then we're looking at the other side where we have these big companies who are trying to reestablish these strongholds and strangleholds on the basically to limit the competition that they have to go up against. So with that being said, do you think that there is room for, like, where's the balancing point between those two in your view?
well, I mean, I think that the large carriers are definitely well suited to build out mobile networks better than anybody else. They would be better than any government controlled entity. I think that in the end that these companies that want to push this company Rivada Networks, I think they have an ulterior motive, in my opinion, of wanting to be the nationwide provider, given the nature of what we know about mobile networks today. And we could talk a little bit about that in more detail, but the idea that commercial business is the way to go is definitely, I think, in the long run, the best option. And this war between us and China regarding 5G technology, well, yes, the United States is way behind these and it's really, and I hate to say it this way because I believe in democracy, I believe in the republic, but when you have a government entity like in China or in Korea making most of the decisions, and there isn't really a whole lot of public input and various agencies involved or corporations making decisions, then you can focus on one target a lot easier. So in that respect, they're a little bit ahead of the game. But the United States is a juggernaut in that respect, and commercial businesses and commercial ventures in our country that will develop innovation, I think in the end will rise way above it and we'll zoom past it. So yeah, we're a little bit on a slow start right now, but we pioneered a lot of technologies, and a lot of these countries wouldn't have anything if it wasn't for leadership at the FCC from the United States. So yes,
Okay,
we're a little bit behind.
so speaking of the FCC, do you think it's fair that they have been basically accused of picking winners and losers in these areas? Could you just elaborate on that a little bit?
Oh, I think it's a very fair assessment to accuse the FCC of picking winners and losers. And there's a couple of different reasons for that. There's the fact that, they're a regulatory agency that needs to regulate companies. And so this is a very highly sophisticated, fast-paced, fast-moving industry. And so it is in their best interest from a managerial perspective or a regulatory perspective to regulate less companies. However, their mandate is to do something that's in the best interest of the public. And so I think that they've been hoodwinked a little bit right now by 5G. And I've made comments on Twitter about this, and I filed public comments to the FCC about this. That during this process, 5G kind of became this thing that did everything, that cured all ills, so to speak. And I've been to this before. This is not the first time that sensationalism took over this technology and made everybody believe that it was going to be the solution for all things. Early 2000, there was this thing called WiMAX. And I remember going to my very first WiMAX seminar and listening to what they had to say and scratching my head and saying, I don't get it. You guys are talking a good game, but I don't get it. And next thing I know, for the next 5 years, WiMAX is going to solve problems. It's going to enable business growth. It's going to create jobs, and it's going to support.
What is WiMAX?
WiMAX was just
WiMAX, yeah.
WiMAX was just a technology. It's like there's Wi-Fi, there's LTE, and there's WiMAX, and then there are various other variants of wireless type technologies that do different things. SCADA, for example, is very low speed wireless technology. But WiMAX was just a buzz term of a wireless technology that is now completely just debunked, so to speak, because it wasn't that great. LTE is a wireless technology that has been pretty great, and it's been great, but it's been specific to licensed technology, licensed spectrum. So companies that own their own spectrum, they run LTE, and it runs really great. Wi-Fi has been designed to run on unlicensed spectrum, and it runs really great. But if you put LTE on an unlicensed spectrum, it runs really bad. And you have to modify it to be able to do the things that Wi-Fi does to be able to deal with coexistence. So, when 5G started hitting the pavement and making all these claims, basically they've gotten the FCC's heads spinning around with the fact that they're going to create, 3 million jobs, have a $500 billion impact to the GDP, and spur $275 billion in investment. They're going to create all this new technology. You're going to have doctors operating on people over great distances with robots. You're going to have self-driving cars that can, anticipate accidents and not crash as much. You're going to have people at NASCAR being able to take their phone and popping it into a little headset and sitting in the driver's seat or the passenger seat of their favorite NASCAR driver. They're creating all this stuff, all these things that all of a sudden 5G is the only thing that can answer these problems, which is not true. It's completely not true, as a matter of fact. There's a lot of Wi-Fi is a technology. There's something called Wi-Fi 6 that is very good and fast, but most of the people representing Wi-Fi are small businesses, and most of the people representing LTE are really big businesses. I mean, it's just a big difference. And so the people that are getting the attention are the people that have the spend $5 million a quarter in lobbying and $50 million a year in advertising for a technology to get the public behind it.
So we were talking about this before, I think. That's very interesting, and it just points to the fact that there's other technologies that are out there that can do similar things, and this 5G won't be the savior of all or the end all be all, as they're trying to sell it. Now, we talked previously about the fiber optic cable lay and getting internet to rural communities and the initiatives that were brought forward and that were put into action, and how a lot of that's kind of fallen to the wayside now with the expansion of the 4G, 5G. So what do you think? Do you think that 5G and all this is going to eventually be overtaken by another technology? This will be just kind of a pointless endeavor, or what is your overall thought on that?
Well, so during the Obama administration, there was this thing called the stimulus program, and the idea there was to get broadband out into rural areas, and they spent quite a bit of money doing that. And many people realized, because I know companies like mine and organizations like WISPA, we basically said that wireless was a better technology when it comes to rural deployment, because you can basically put in an access point and cover a 15-mile radius. But with fiber, you've got to run very expensive fiber that costs anywhere from $2,000 to $10,000 a passed home. And with wireless, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $100 to $200 a passed home. But the phone companies, and I've mentioned this to a lot of people, the phone companies think almost to the degree of tectonic plate time frames. They plan things in 10, 20, 50-year time frames, and so they plan for the long game. So the ARA, the stimulus program during the Obama administration, really got all these carriers fiber into the places that they want. And now they want wireless, because wireless is the way to go. And so 5G is the technology to get the last mile in most places. If you look at DC and Richmond and Dallas, Texas, and like I said, big cities, fiber is a really good solution, because you're passing 20 to 50 homes or units, living units per block. And so your cost for deployment is so much cheaper. And once it's in, it's in. But when you're in a rural area and you're passing a home every, 5 miles, it gets really expensive. So this wireless technology is really definitely hitting off. And with 5G, they're going to implement lots of things that they realized that 4G was failing in. Like, for example, Verizon tried to do fixed wireless over their 4G, and what they realized is that when they installed somebody with one of their little bucket antenna systems, looked like a 5-gallon bucket, it was generally a person that was in a rural area that was about as far away as the limitations of that particular transmitter is going to work, and are going to be the heaviest user. And so when you get a college student, for example, or a high school student, for example, that's living 5 miles from the tower, and they are the heaviest user on that network, everybody feels it, because it causes the network to not be able to operate quite as well, because it has to accommodate for almost the weakest link in the entire chain of that network.
Is that like a true proportion there? Like you could be in a rural community and have somebody using that at the end of it, who's using the most, and they actually affect the others?
Well, yeah, and you see even in cable networks, when they started offering, when Comcast and other companies started offering 100, 200, 300 megabit service, it was usually the one kid in the neighborhood that brought down the entire network. So,
that's incredible. That's incredible.
With 5G, it's even worse, because it has to do with a combination of usage, link rates, and link rates are then attributed to how much signal the person has. So if the person is the weakest signal and they have the most demand, it has a negative impact on everybody on that particular sector. Now, LTE has some tools to address that to a certain degree, but given the volume of users and the people coming in and out of the networks, it just turned out to be really bad. In fact, I get a lot of business from people that have Verizon home service now, home fusion. They'll call me up and they'll say, I just need something better, because it was really great when I got it, and now it's really terrible. And that's just generally how it works. So that's why they dropped that product. But 5G, they're going to try to address that a little bit by the fact that they've got a lot more spectrum to work with, so they can segment users a little bit better. And that's just it's just physics and math and technology in general. So we have the same issue in my industry with wireless networks. So we have minimum signal requirements, so that if somebody is has a certain weak signal because a tree is growing up in the path and they're a heavy user, we go see them, move their antenna, cut their tree, or tell them they have to get service elsewhere, or try to put them into a different sector. We do everything we possibly can, but it's just a lot of different things with wireless that the cellular industry has to deal with that fiber doesn't.
Right, and that's your business. Is that you've been the president of the Wireless Internet Service Provider Association, and you've been working in this industry for how long? Quite some time. I don't want to put a date on it, but
I've been in the internet business since '95, so I've seen it from the infancy. When the
AOL dial-up, and now we're here.
Yeah, and it's been a very interesting ride. I've seen just about everything.
That's pretty incredible. So now let me I've kind of saved this topic for near the end here, because I know that we're both not medical doctors, so it's hard for us to really give medical opinions, but there is this overwhelming sentiment among a lot of people out there, probably a lot of people watching this show, and it's almost this fear of 5G. It's a fear of what it could do, what it could be, what the health effects are. Now, I know that you have a good idea about a lot of this stuff, and just in the technology in itself, how that works. So why don't you talk us through a little bit about what you see the possible dangers of 5G could be, and how those are being mitigated right now?
Well, the existence of the 5G in the current spectrum, I don't think that once you see 5G implemented in the frequencies that they have today, I don't think you're going to see a whole lot of difference. And again, let me just preface this, but I'm not necessarily an expert at the effects of radiation, but they do classify this as non-ionizing radiation, and so it's supposedly not dangerous. However, at every cell site, there's always a warning, and every tower climber has to wear a little device on their body that tells them their radiation exposure. And so non-ionizing radiation can have immediate effects, but not necessarily long-term effects, like nuclear radiation, uranium, that kind of stuff, where your body is poisoned. But it can have a damaging effect, and I think that that's a concern that the FCC does have.
Like we talked about, like the microwave. It could
the millimeter wave ones are the ones that I'm really concerned about the most, because in that case, a tree, a wall, and skin and rain all have a devastating effect to that particular type of frequency. What's called attenuates it, and that makes it low. And so to offset that, they have to increase the power at the transmitter site. So the transmitters will be, at the top of let's say a 40 or 80 foot light pole. So they're not going to be right next to your head. And probably in many cases, they won't be next to your window either. But the part that concerns me the most is the part the user has to have. So that's the phone. Now, in 5G, they're going to have two different types of 5G. They're going to have something called a puck, which is, a box that you stick in your window, and it'll pick up the signal, and it will turn it into Wi-Fi that your whole house will use. So in that particular case, it'll have probably what's called a phased array antenna built into it. So even though it's omnidirectional, it will only use the antennas pointing in the direction to give it the best signal. And that's a pretty standard technology in Wi-Fi today. It's called a phased array antenna. But it's the phones, the handhelds, that I concern. So I read a report or a filing at the FCC of Motorola's plans to build a 5G for their for handheld, and I think it might even have been for this particular phone that I have. This is the Moto 3, and so it's got a little mod I can pull off it. And this is my battery mod, which I love, and I can put a 5G mod on there when it comes available. So their concern is this, okay? So that's great if the antenna that it's broadcasting to is over there, but if the antenna is right there, well, you can see it's going right through my head.
Yes, man. Oh my gosh, that is true. Yeah.
So the ability for it to receive the signal far away is great, but now it has to be able to communicate back to that antenna with this signal going through my head. And so they have a proximity sensor built into the technology so that it will not use the antenna, whatever that antenna is, to broadcast through my head. And I'm assuming that's because that's not good. It would be my assumption.
I think so too.
And the concern that I have, because again, these are, they call them smartphones, but they also have another name. They are a computer on a network. And every computer on a network at some point in time will become compromised for one reason or another. Either it'll be hacked from the outside because of an exploit, or in most cases, because the customer or the user downloaded something on there that basically invited all the bad people to come in. And so
like downloading the Facebook app.
Or anything, it's really, some of the most innocent things can be compromised. And so, like the Internet of Things, all right, people are hot on this thing called the Internet of Things. And what that means is that you're getting a device that has Wi-Fi capabilities at your house. Refrigerators, toys, everything. They are what we would consider as people, as users, a low priority target, because we're not putting our financial data on them. We're not putting our personal information in them.
It's the same principle as them using printers were early printers that were hooked up to the internet to get into your Wi-Fi, to get into your systems. Now
this, on the other hand, is very, very crucial. It's got private information, and it's all this stuff. So the interface itself, if I leave it somewhere and they don't have the password, they can't get into it, okay? But now I'm at home on my Wi-Fi network, and my refrigerator, which has no personal information at all, it just tells me when it's time to get milk, also
I'm
has
sorry, I
access
can't
to
help laughing at this. It's
I
just
know, but it
crazy.
also has access to the friendly side of my phone, known as the wireless LAN. Okay, so now the refrigerator gets hacked. The refrigerator hacks my phone. Phone now is broadcasting millimeter wave through my brain, and I don't know why I feel sick all the time.
My gosh.
So those are just
Yeah.
speculative.
And that's speculative, but it shows the inherent, dangers that could present themselves in the future. So I think that's definitely a good point to talk about. And yeah, so like we both said, we're not medical doctors. We don't have the ability to tell you for sure what it is or isn't. But speculatively speaking, there's a lot of stuff that could happen. Is there
I
anything
think it's
else?
just time. Time is going to tell. And I think we're going to have to just, when it comes to this kind of stuff, you got to trust the FCC to do the right thing when it comes to safety, because that is their number one thing. Anything that broadcasts a wireless signal has to have a FCC ID, and that means it's been tested by not necessarily FCC, but an independent FCC authorized laboratory. So if I make a pen that has electronics in it that gives off a radio signal, even if it's incidentally, it's not necessarily primary, but it's incidental. I take it to a lab, and they've got plenty of labs up in Washington, Northern Virginia, but all over the country. And I pay them, hey, put this phone and this pin in your lab, and then turn it on, and you tell me if it's safe, so that I can then, apply for my FCC ID that says it's safe, and sell this pen and make $1 million. But
And right to that point, it's like, I think that the products are being safe. A lot of the people who are concerned about this ultimately, I believe, have this feeling that it's going to be, covertly weaponized, and that's all yet to be determined. I don't think either of us can make a speculative guess as to whether that would happen or not. But I think we could definitely say that it's in the realm of possibilities. And but as far as in general, it should be a safe technology if it can get through the clearances, and there's definitely going to be protocols put in place to protect the end user ultimately. So I guess we'll kind of wrap this up a little bit. I appreciate you coming in. I have one more question for you. Why don't you tell us what some of the solutions for this are? Like, what are the solutions to the nationalization of 5G? How do we fix this? What is an organization like the Wireless ISP Association? What do they think? Give me your concluding your thoughts in conclusion.
Well, one of the last things I worked on at WISPA was this thing called the CBRS, and it's called the Citizens Broadband Radio Service. And it was basically a concept that was set up by the FCC probably a good 5-6 years ago. And the idea was to take some spectrum that wasn't being used very effectively in the United States, in this case, satellite, both commercial and military satellite spectrum in the 3.5 gigahertz band, it's about 150 megahertz, and create a system that allowed small and medium-sized and even large providers to be able to lease this spectrum in a cost-effective way. Also, give them an opportunity for unlicensed type use for low-cost entrance into the market. And so, this spectrum was supposed to be used for either urbanized LTE type 5G, or it could be used for rural higher power wireless broadband. And that could also be LTE, but it could also be Wi-Fi, or it could be some yet to be determined technology. It was not really technology specific. And so things were going along, and they were developing this thing called the Spectrum Access System. WISPA was very involved. I was the president at the time, and we had people from our organization working with this third-party group called the Wireless Innovation Alliance, or Wireless Innovation Forum, which is a group of people very smart, PhD engineer types from Verizon, from the technology companies at Qualcomm that made chips, AT&T, Google, everybody that had a stake in this. And so we were all working toward the same effort. And then at some point in time, the CTIA, which is the wireless industry for the cellular market, told people at the FCC that, hey, we need to make this thing different. And without getting into a whole lot of detail, Mike O'Reilly, the commissioner, changed the rules based on a proposal that came from T-Mobile. And that's a phone company I like to call the stooges for AT&T, because they run the same type of mobile technology, and so AT&T wants to own them. But anyhow, they made this change, and what it did is it effectively changed the nature of the citizens broadband radio service that was going to be open and available to any small business all the way up to any large business, and made it more exclusive to large business mostly, by changing the size of how large of an area was the minimum size you could purchase. And the term of the licenses converted it from being an operational expense to a capital expense. And historically, cellular phone companies can lay down anywhere from $10 to $50 billion for this spectrum. And that's a lot of money. But moreover, they could take that spectrum and put it on their books as an asset. And as an asset that was now becoming scarce, it became an appreciated asset in value. So 10 million became 20 million, 50 million became, or 10 billion became 20 billion, and 50 billion became 100 billion in value, which means you can go to the market, not just the bank, but what they call the market, and leverage that to get money, relatively low cost money, to continue investing in your company. So it's like printing money in a way. And so the FCC's plan was to create this spectrum deployment model that allowed for companies to effectively use the spectrum, because the carriers were buying the spectrum and just sitting on it to appreciate its value until they could get enough money out of the markets to build it. And this new spectrum was supposed to be available to small businesses that would actually use it to build out in rural areas or add more capacity in urbanized areas for LTE. So when they made this change, various organizations got involved in trying to fight this, WISPO being one of them, and they took up this whole argument of the small businesses basically finding solutions in rural areas where large businesses not. And that way, that meant that the FCC should change their mind. But they didn't realize that the large businesses like Verizon and AT&T were telling the FCC, no, we'll build out in the rural areas. We won't be like we were in the past. We're going to do the right thing this time if you give us what we want. And so they gave them what they want. And we're already starting to see an erosion in the promise, where companies like Verizon that were working with rural phone companies for roaming agreements are starting to pull back and saying, hey, we don't really want to work with you guys anymore. We're going to build our own thing. And so WISPO kind of lost that battle. And now the next battle is with some other spectrum very close to that. It's called the 3.7 to 4.2 gigahertz band. And it's what's used by the old satellite companies that, you have the big giant satellite dish in your backyard called the C-band satellite, which some people still use for picking up, free satellite transmissions that are available to pick up that are unencrypted. So they're using a lot of this spectrum, and so the phone companies, the cellular phone companies, they want to have access to that spectrum too. So the idea is to move all the C-band guys down. So they've got 500 megahertz of spectrum, move them all down to this 200 megahertz or 300 megahertz, and then have the rest of it auctioned off to the cellular phone companies so they can make a lot of money at the FCC and build more 5G. So we're fine with that. But WISPA says this band that's down here that the satellite companies are going to be allocated to, that band can be shared by fixed broadband providers in rural areas without interfering with them. And so they put together a proposal to the FCC to say, let us have access to that spectrum so that we can have more broadband in rural areas and still allow the C-band operators to continue to do what they're doing, because the technology is different. So satellite guys are pointing up. They're transmitting on this frequency up. They're not listening to it. And they're also transmitting it in a circular antenna type wave, whereas the fixed wireless providers are looking this way, and they're using either vertical or horizontal waves. And so they're not compatible, and they don't interfere with each other, and they can coexist, even to the point where if I'm near a specific uplink satellite operator that's using a specific frequency, I can just not use that particular frequency altogether. And that's all done today via some type of coordination system. It's very simple to use, and it's not and it's proven effective. And so we made that proposal, but the FCC has been kind of hedging their bets a little bit about on this, because the cellular phone companies want to own it all. And the FCC just needs to realize that the oligarchies that they're supporting right now, the AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, don't have the best interest of the public in mind. And these small companies that are dotted all across the nation, there's like probably a good 3,000, maybe 4,000 small wireless ISPs. These people live in the communities they serve. They know their customers. I can tell you, right now, most of my customers, I know them in a way that AT&T and Verizon don't know their customers. I can tell you, when I was at their house last, I know what their house looks like. I know, what their sons are doing. I know things. Plus, I can tailor my products and services, or a small business like mine can tailor products and services to meet the needs of the community they serve. Whereas your Verizons and AT&T is, one size fits all, and if you don't fit, then pound sand. So I really think that the public needs to understand that these types of issues that are happening at the FCC, where they're choosing the big companies to be the providers that provide customers broadband, results in these after effects. And up till now, even up till since the net neutrality that got disbanded this last year, the reason why that came is because of the fact that you only had one provider in most areas. You had you had cable, you had DSL, and it was either the phone company or the cable company. Some people had the luxury of both cable and phone, but because companies like Verizon and AT&T sort of kind of let their cable or let their telephone networks get in disarray because of cost-cutting measures and dumping more money into wireless, DSL became such an ineffective product in most cases that cable was the only option. Fiber is not that widely built in most of the United States, so cable is the dominant player. Wireless easily overtook DSL. I mean, we don't even, DSL is not even my competitor. We get people that have DSL all the time, and they's like, well, I got a smart TV, I've got my kid's Xbox, my daughter's iPad, and my husband's got a workshop, and he's got to be able to watch his YouTube videos so he knows how to fix the truck. They're completely overloading these DSL networks, and so cable was really the only option for them, and cable is not available in most places because it's costly to build. And so wireless can now deliver up to 25, in some cases even more, megabits per second, so it's adequate for all these applications. And so having access to the spectrum and having small businesses have access to it in these rural areas where they're filling niche services for people is very important. And I think that the FCC needs to really, hedge their bet, so to speak, on this 5G deployment scenario that they keep focusing on, and realize that 5G can mean a lot of things, and it should mean some fixed wireless and some small businesses being part of the ecosystem. I think the mantra that I pushed last year when I was pushing this issue at CBRS was competition diversity. And I did a lot of research.
That's exactly what I wanted to say. So, in this conclusion, it's like, to put it all kind of out for layman's terms, because a lot of people watching this aren't, ISP experts like you, but it basically is, like you were about to point out, that it's destroying competition diversity, right? And that is a big problem, because when you remove competition, you know what comes in and takes its place, and which is basically nothing. No innovation. There's no drive for a market to grow, and other than the way that the one or two or few companies that control it want it to. And it's also about fighting for the right to provide quality service to people in rural America who depend and need, they need access to internet. just as much as somebody in New York City needs it, somebody out in, I don't know, Amarillo, Texas, in rural Amarillo, Texas would want that same kind of access, right? So, and that's what I think your overall argument is kind of driving to, is that the FCC has to step in with regulation to help small business remain competitive. Is that
Well,
kind
it's
of
not
the
necessarily
takeaway?
regulation, but it's more policy. So regulation
Right. Excuse me.
is
Yeah.
to protect
Policy.
the consumer from companies taking advantage of them. But policy, in this case, can enable competition in a way that doesn't require it to be as regulated as some people are saying. So if you're a user of internet and your internet company does a bad job for whatever reason, either because they've made it a policy that they're not going to allow you to have fast access to YouTube, or they've made it a policy that they'd rather you to use their online video services versus somebody else's, then you go to somebody else. But if you don't have any choice, if Comcast is your only option, if Verizon Fios is your only option, if any of these Spectrum companies, Cox Cable, if they're your only option, then what is your option then for recourse? So if you have bad service, you got to go to the government and complain. And that's because they've purposely over the years supported these companies and making sure that there was only one or two companies in an area. I don't think it's not a conspiracy per se. It was just the ecosystem. It's easier to give away $1 billion to a few companies than it is to give $1 billion away to 1,000 companies. It's easier to regulate 5 or 6 companies than it is to regulate thousands of companies. And I think the FCC just really needs to take a look at this and realize that it's not their job to pick winners and losers because of inefficiencies at their division or inefficiencies with their government. They need to realize that small businesses need to be part of the solution, because in any area, a big business is going to fail to meet the needs of some of the clients that they service. And those clients need to have an option. Otherwise, you end up back to you're going to have government regulations, and when the government starts regulating these things, all they do is screw it up.
Yeah. And we know what happens when big government gets bigger and they get more involved, and it just always ends up becoming an incredible mess. So I want to thank you, first of all, for coming on the show today. I hope we hit a lot of the points that were really important in diving into this issue. And again, I just want to give you a minute real quick. If you want to let everybody know what you're doing, if you got anything going on, I know we got American Priority 2019, the conference coming up in Miami, and there's a lot of other stuff going on. So I'm going to give you a minute to kind of just shout out to everyone what you're doing, where they can find your work. If they want to find out more information about all this and what you're doing, go ahead and let them know.
Well, the next conference for American Priority is going to be at the Trump Doral, and we're going to open up registration next month, as long as everything goes well. And it's going to be, we take a lot of what we learned at the last conference, because that was our first conference. Things that worked well, we're going to do again. Things that didn't work so well, we're going to do something different. But we're really going to try to focus on the main core, and that is to promote the First Amendment and citizen journalism. But we're also going to do the other things that we promised, and that is to bring fellowship. So people that come across the country and meet new people or meet friends that they've only known online, and do stuff together and have fun and really share ideas. That's the big key, I think, to anything that what we're doing, is that people need to be able to share ideas, but they also need to get off the computers, and they need to show up at an event and talk to people and have real interactions with folks and share ideas and learn from each other. So we're going to be doing a lot of that. We're going to try to have a golf tournament, which is going to be a lot of fun. The Trump Doral is a PGA golf.
I'm a pretty good golfer, so yeah, I'll be in on that.
I'm a terrible golfer.
That's okay. I worked in the golf industry for a while when I was younger. I worked at golf courses.
I told everybody that I like to hit the golf ball with my aluminum Easton.
Yeah, you could probably get a little distance off that. I bet my driver could put it out there a little further, but That sounds
But
awesome. Yeah. What else?
if you want to learn more about what's going on at WISPA, which I think everybody should probably, everybody that's in the conservative movement should really take a look at what they're doing, because they are, I'm a little biased, okay, biased alert. I was, on the board for 6 years. I was a member, I have been a member for almost 9 years. And, for a little underfunded organization, they have had a significant amount of impact in DC. It's just that, I think that the compliment that we're getting from the carriers, the big carriers, is that our success is now their success. So they're taking advantage of all the things that WISPA has been saying about the wireless industry and trying to adopt it into their own mold so that they can continue getting all the money. So, and I personally am not a big fan of getting money from the government, but these companies, some companies are. And so just take a look at WISPA.org and look at what they're doing there. And they have their next conference coming up in May in Cincinnati. If you're in the wireless industry and don't know anything about it, excuse me, not May, March, this month. If you're in the wireless industry, you should check it out if you haven't already. And then I just think, we're doing other stuff that we'll be announcing soon. American Priority has sort of taken on a new mantle of trying to help individual conservative talent get promoted. Our most recent event that we were participating in was at the Grammys. And so we had a client, his name is Ricky Rebel, and he is a conservative pop star. His music is very interesting. We had him at the Grammys, got him onto the red carpet where he did a reveal.
Yeah, he wore the Make America Great Again jacket. That was very awesome.
It was the Keep America Great Trump 2020 jacket. He went on the red carpet.
Oh, yeah.
And then he took it off and made it inside out and put it back on. So Google that, Ricky Rebel, Grammy, so you can see all the stories and videos about that. But we're going to be doing a lot more of that. We're going to be going up to California on the 23rd to meet with a group that is going to be doing a protest on Ilhan Omar. She's going to that fundraising conference, CAIR. I think they refer to that as a Hamas front group. So we're going to be going and participating with that.
Hey, man. Yeah, CARE. Yeah, we all know about CARE for America. Yeah. So that's awesome. And it's AmericanPriority.com, right? If they want to check out information about the conference, check out WISPA.org if you want to get more information on internet service providers of America and what they're doing, wireless internet. And do you have, in your personal Twitter, do you have a Twitter you want to shout out or anything, any social media?
Yeah, so the American Priority is PriorityConf, at PriorityConf. And my personal is Alex P. HSL. That's my personal / company Twitter account where I talk about, I'm not a big, I don't talk a lot, but when I say something, it's probably important. So pay attention.
Will do. And what we'll do is we'll throw links to everything down in the description. But I just want to say thank you so much. You've been a good friend for a while. I know you will be to come. It's a pleasure to have you on the show to get this information out there. I think it's an important issue. And I just want to say thank you for coming on the show.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I appreciate you having me on, and I'm sure we'll be talking again soon.
All right. Take care, and we'll until the next one. We'll see you next time.